Commander Zach Vorex stood at the edge of the observation deck of the Imperial battle cruiser Dominant Force. His scaled arms crossed over his armored chest, his four eyes narrowing at the blue-green planet that rotated quietly on the massive viewscreen. Earth. So small, so fragile, so primitive. The Vraxian Empire had seen 1,000 worlds, conquered hundreds, subjugated dozens of species who had once sworn they would never bow. All of them had fallen in line, eventually, after seeing the might of Vraxian fleets. Cities reduced to rubble in seconds, armies melted away under energy fire, resistance burned from history itself. To Vorex, Earth was no different, a backwater sphere crawling with mammals who had barely learned to climb beyond their atmosphere. They should have accepted the Empire's offer the first time it was spoken. But they hadn't. "Commander," rasped Lieutenant Grull, her voice carrying the distinct hiss of her Kultoran heritage. Her tendrils twitched against her face, betraying unease. "The diplomatic team has returned from their meeting with the humans." Vorex turned, his scales catching the deck's dim light, glinting like steel. "And what did they say?" Grull hesitated. "They declined, sir." Vorex's ridges flared upward. "They declined." His voice dropped into a dangerous whisper, low enough to make the nearest officers stiffen. "Our offer of protection, they refused it." "Yes, Commander, and more than that." She lowered her gaze to her datapad, reading the transcript word for word. "The human representative laughed in our faces." A rumble escaped Vorex's throat, a guttural sound that vibrated through his chest. Among his species, it was not amusement but something darker, the growl of a predator deciding whether to strike. "Repeat their exact words." Grull's tendrils twitched harder. "They said, 'Thanks, but no thanks. We have been protecting ourselves just fine for thousands of years without alien overlords taxing us into oblivion.'" The deck went silent. Several junior officers looked away, pretending to focus on their consoles. Vorex slammed one of his fists down on the railing, the metallic impact echoing. "Overlords?" His tone dripped venom. "That is what they call us, overlords." Grull flinched. "It seems so, sir." Vorex paced toward the center of the command deck, each heavy step echoing. "Fools, do they not understand? The Empire does not offer twice. We extend the hand of order. We build stability. We—" He stopped mid-sentence. On the screen, Earth rotated silently, clouds curling in lazy spirals above oceans and land. He imagined it in flames. "Perhaps," he said at last, voice cold, "a demonstration is in order, something small, a colony, a settlement, just enough to remind them what happens to those who mock the Vraxian Empire." From her station, Communications Officer Plex raised his spindly Zenari fingers. "Sir, before you give the order, we are receiving a transmission from Earth, directed to you personally." Vorex's scales rippled in surprise. "To me? How would they know my name?" "Unknown, sir, but they are asking for Commander Zach Vorex of the Vraxian Imperial Fleet by title." The deck stirred with uneasy whispers. The humans had no access to Vraxian fleet logs, no intercepted communiques, and yet— "Put it through," Vorex ordered. The great viewscreen flickered. Earth vanished. In its place appeared the face of a human woman, dark skin, short curly black hair, and sharp eyes that seemed to pierce through him as if she had studied him all her life. "My name is Captain Tara Jackson, Earth Defense Force." Her tone was calm, measured, but her gaze was unwavering. "Commander Vorex, we need to talk." Vorex straightened, his armor plates clicking into alignment. "Earth Defense Force," he let out a low laugh. "Your species has a defense force." Her lips curved, not into a smile, but something harder. "We've had one for a long time. We just never needed to show it to you." Gasps spread across the deck. "Captain Jackson," Vorex said, his voice low and threatening, "you misunderstand. We are not here to conquer. We are here to extend the same arrangement we have with 100 other worlds. Protection in exchange for resources." Jackson's eyes narrowed. "History has another word for that arrangement, Commander. We call it extortion." Vorex's scales bristled. "Careful, human, the Empire does not tolerate insults." "Neither do we." The silence that followed was sharp enough to cut. Then Jackson leaned forward slightly, as if daring him. "Your admiral threatened New Zealand, didn't he? A demonstration strike to remind us of our place." The deck went still. Grull's tendrils froze mid-twitch. Plex stopped breathing. Vorex's chest constricted. That is impossible. How could you know that? Jackson's gaze didn't waver. Because we've been listening since the moment you entered our system. Vorex froze, his mind whirred. Impossible. Their encryption was unbreakable. No species outside the Empire had ever cracked it. No species had ever dared. A bluff, he told himself. It had to be a bluff. Impressive parlor trick, he growled. But it changes nothing. You refused our offer. There will be consequences. Jackson tilted her head slightly, as if she pitied him. Commander, before you make a mistake you'll regret. Ask your archives about the Drayorans. The word hit the deck like a thunderclap. The Drayorans, a power that had once rivaled the Empire, a race whose fleets had blotted out stars, a civilization that had vanished mysteriously 70 cycles ago. They're extinct, Vorex said flatly. Yes, Jackson replied, they are. The silence that followed was suffocating. Officers exchanged glances, unsettled. Everyone in the galaxy knew the name Drayoran. Everyone whispered about their fall. No one knew why. No one until now. Vorex narrowed his eyes. Are you claiming humans destroyed the Drayorans? Jackson's lips curved into a small, humorless smile. I'm not claiming anything, Commander. I'm simply telling you, do your homework before you fire on Earth. The screen flickered, then went dark. The command deck of the dominant force remained frozen in stunned silence. Vorex turned back to the planet on the view screen. Its oceans sparkled in sunlight. Its landmasses lay quiet, oblivious to the fleet that could erase them with a single order. Yet his claws tapped restlessly against the railing. For the first time in his career, Zach Vorex felt something he hadn't felt since his hatchling days. Uncertainty. Commander, Grull whispered, breaking the silence. Your orders. Vorex's scales prickled. He bared his teeth. Prepare the fleet. Target New Zealand. One shot, remote enough to avoid escalation. His voice hardened. But let them see it. Let them know resistance is futile. The weapons officer's claws hovered over his console. The ship hummed as the massive energy cannon began to charge. Target locked, sir. Vorex raised his hand. Fire. The deck thrummed as the beam launched, a blinding spear of white energy racing toward Earth's atmosphere. And then, just before it struck, the beam dissolved into nothing. A cascade of shimmering light spread across the planet like an invisible wall. The energy scattered into space, leaving Earth untouched. Sir, Plex shouted, eyes wide. The planet. Grull's console screamed with alerts. Commander, Earth is surrounded by something, a field, no, an entire shield, planetary scale. Impossible, Vorex whispered. His claws dug into the railing. That technology doesn't exist. And yet on the screen, Earth remained untouched, cradled in a glowing cocoon of invisible strength. From the communications console, Plex's voice cracked. Sir, we are being hailed from multiple channels, dozens, hundreds from all over the planet. The deck held its breath. Put it through, Vorex ordered, though his voice was less steady than he liked. The screen flickered again. Dozens of human faces filled it, uniforms of every style, languages from every corner of the world, eyes burning with defiance. And at the center, Captain Jackson's calm, steady gaze. Commander Vorex, she said, her voice echoing through the stunned deck, you have fired on Earth. This is your only warning. The transmission cut. Silence. Then alarms blared. Energy signatures lit up Plex's console, thousands of them, from orbit, from the oceans, from the moon. Commander, Plex whispered, his voice pale with fear, they are everywhere. The dominant force shuddered under a sudden impact. Sir, the damage officer cried, shields breached by a kinetic weapon. The deck rocked again, consoles sparked, officers fell. And for the first time in his life, Commander Zach Vorex realized the truth. The humans were not the prey. They were the hunters. The dominant force trembled as another kinetic strike hammered its hull. Warning klaxons howled through the command deck. Sparks rained from a ruptured console, showering the weapons officer in flickering orange light. Shields down to 30%, he shouted, his hands scrambled across his display. They shouldn't be able to do this, Commander. Our defenses weren't built to counter. Enough, Vorex's voice cut through the chaos, but even he couldn't hide the quiver beneath it. His claws dug into the railing, his scales rippling with unease. Report, Lieutenant Grull. The Kultoran officer's tendrils writhed as she scanned her instruments. Sir, it's not just Earth. I'm detecting weapons signatures from their moon, from beneath their oceans, from orbital platforms cloaked so effectively they didn't even register until they powered up. Her voice lowered, horror creeping in. They've hidden an entire defense grid, Commander. We are surrounded. Impossible. The word rattled in Vorex's skull like a curse. Humanity was primitive. The Empire's intelligence files had described them as barely spacefaring, fractured by politics, struggling with energy shortages and climate damage. They were supposed to be defenseless. And yet, the ship shuddered again. A thundering impact threw two junior officers to the deck. One didn't rise. Commander, Plex, the communications officer, called out. His spindly frame shook as his fingers raced across controls. We're receiving another transmission, multiple sources this time. Put it through, Vorex growled. His pride demanded it, even as dread knotted his stomach. The great screen flickered. Earth vanished. In its place, the faces of humans filled the display. They wore different uniforms, sleek black of orbital units, deep blue of naval commands, green and khaki of terrestrial armies, but their eyes all burned with the same steady flame. One by one, they spoke their names. General Wei Jiao, Chinese Space Command. Admiral Vikram Singh, Indian Orbital Defense. Colonel Sophia Mendes, Pan-American Defense Coalition. More followed, dozens of leaders, voices from across Earth's nations, a planet divided in culture but now united in purpose. And then Captain Jackson appeared at the center of the mosaic, calm, unyielding. Commander Vorex, she said, you've tested our defenses, you've fired upon our world. Consider this your one and only warning. The transmission cut. The command deck fell into silence, an awful, suffocating silence broken only by the hum of failing systems. Lieutenant Grull turned to him, her tendrils pale with fear. Sir, what are your orders? Vorex's mind raced. He needed to reassert control, to prove to his crew, to himself, that the Vraxian Empire was still supreme. Target an uninhabited area, he muttered. Something small, remote. Let them see a taste of our firepower, nothing more. The weapons officer hesitated. His claws hovered over the firing controls, but his voice trembled. Sir, with respect, their defenses. Do as I command, Vorex roared. His scales flared, his chest vibrating with fury. No one dared resist. The cannon powered up again, a low growl filling the ship as energy built. On the screen, Earth rotated peacefully, cloud banks drifting above emerald islands. Target locked, the officer whispered. Fire. The beam launched, pure, focused death screaming across space. It reached the atmosphere and shattered against the invisible barrier once more, exploding into 1,000 lights that sparkled harmlessly above the planet. Gasps filled the deck. Vorex's claws clenched the railing until it bent beneath his grip. This cannot be, he rasped. A planetary shield requires thousands of generators, a power output greater than a starship fleet. They don't have that technology. But Grull's console screamed with alerts. Sir, it's worse than that. Our instruments aren't even detecting this as technology. It doesn't register in any known database. Vorex's scales crawled. Something deeper than fear stirred in his gut, something he refused to name. Commander, Plex whispered, his pallid face drained of color. We're being hailed again. The main screen flickered. This time only Captain Jackson appeared. Her face was calm, her eyes unflinching. Commander, she said, her tone almost regretful. You still don't understand, do you? Vorex bared his teeth. Understand what, human? That we are not what your files say. That we are not prey. That Earth is not a prize to be claimed. Her gaze hardened. You threatened our people. You fired on our planet. You forced our hand. Now you will learn why your archives whisper about the Drayorans. Why your ancestors sealed their records about us. Vorex's heart hammered. What do you mean? Jackson leaned forward. You're not the first Empire to make the mistake of underestimating us, and you won't be the last, but you may be the last to survive it. The transmission cut once again, leaving the deck in oppressive silence. A sudden jolt nearly threw Vorex from his feet. Alarms blared. Sir, cried the damage officer. Direct hit, our shields have collapsed, multiple kinetic strikes. Another impact rattled the deck, this one worse than the last. Consoles burst in flame. Officers screamed. "Return fire," Vorex bellowed. "Sir, we can't," the weapons officer shouted. His hands flew across controls. "Our targeting systems are being jammed. They're inside our networks." Inside, Vorex's blood went cold. The ship's AI spoke, its mechanical voice carrying an edge of urgency it had never used before. "Threat assessment, maximum. Survival probability less than 20%. Recommendation, immediate retreat." Retreat, the word burned Vorex's pride. The Vraxian Empire did not retreat, they crushed, they annihilated. But the tremor in his legs betrayed him. "Commander," Grull whispered, her tendrils quivering. What if this is the fate of the Dryorans?" The question froze him. The mighty Dryoran fleets, the worlds they ruled, the terror their name once carried, all gone, wiped from history, and now was Earth repeating that story. The ship shook violently again, the lights dimmed. "Sir," Plex shouted, his voice cracking. "Incoming transmission from High Command, urgent priority." Vorex turned, scales bristling. "From the capital." "Yes, sir, they say the capital is under attack." The deck erupted in gasps. Vorex's chest constricted. "By whom?" Plex's voice broke. "Unknown vessels, sir, but their design, they look human." The view screen shifted to a live feed from the Vraxian capital. The grand spires of the Empire's heartland, spires that had stood for 10,000 years, burned under the shadow of massive warships. Warships with a design unmistakably human. Vorex staggered, his claws gripping the railing as if it were the only thing anchoring him to reality. "This is impossible," he whispered. And yet on the screen, the impossible burned in vivid color. The mighty Vraxian Empire, bleeding before the eyes of its proudest commander. The command deck of the dominant force fell into stunned silence as the feed from the Vraxian capital played. On the view screen, the proud spires of Vrea, shining jewel of the Empire, burned. Towers that had withstood meteor strikes and wars for millennia crumbled like paper under precision bombardment. The skies were choked with smoke, cut through by the sharp silhouettes of ships that should not exist. Ships with brutal functional lines, ships with human design. "Sir," Plex whispered, his voice trembling. This cannot be. They were primitives, barely spacefaring." Lieutenant Grull's tendrils writhed uncontrollably. "Yet those are their vessels. Commander, our capital is burning." Vorex's claws dug deep into the railing until sparks jumped where metal met scale. His mind screamed against what his eyes showed him. It was not possible. It was not possible. "Communications," he barked. His voice was harsh, more from desperation than authority. "Confirm the transmission's authenticity. This could be falsified." Plex's fingers danced across his console. His pale skin grew whiter with each second. "Authentication codes match, sir. It is real. The capital is under attack. Human vessels are in orbit." The deck erupted in horrified murmurs. Officers who had faced countless battles, who had broken rebellions with a word, now looked as frightened as hatchlings. Another shudder rolled through the dominant force. Consoles flickered. "Damage report," Vorex roared. "Multiple kinetic impacts," the damage officer cried. "Hull breach is sealed, but decks 12 through 14 are compromised. Shields are gone. We are exposed." "Exposed to humans." The AI's synthetic voice cut through the panic. "Warning. Enemy targeting systems have locked on. Recommend immediate withdrawal to minimize total fleet losses." The word came again, withdrawal. Each time it pierced Vorex like a blade. He opened his mouth to order a counterattack, but before he could speak, the view screen changed. A single human face filled it. Captain Jackson. Calm, steady, unshaken by the chaos she had unleashed. "Commander Vorex," she said, "I tried to warn you." Her tone was not mocking, not cruel, it was worse, pitying. "You should have listened," she continued. "You should have done your research. You are not the first empire to call us primitive. You may not be the last, but you will remember what came next." Vorex bared his teeth. "How?" His voice cracked under the weight of disbelief. "How could you possibly strike Vrea? It is thousands of light years away." Jackson's lips curved slightly. "You think you discovered Earth 3 years ago. You discovered what we allowed you to see. We've had faster-than-light travel for decades. We simply never advertised it." The deck froze. The truth settled over them like a suffocating fog. All this time, Jackson continued, her voice like iron wrapped in silk. You thought us fractured, weak, struggling, and yet we have been watching, preparing for centuries. Lies, Vorex spat, his pride clawed desperately for purchase. If you had this power, you would have used it long ago, you would have conquered. That is what civilizations do. No, Jackson said simply. That is what empires do. We are not conquerors, Commander, we are survivors, and we are very good at making sure no one ever enslaves us again. The words landed like strikes harder than any kinetic slug. Another officer shouted over the din. Commander, High Command demands communication, urgent. Patch it through to my quarters, Vorex snarled. He couldn't let his crew see what came next. The screen split, showing the faces of the Vraxian High Council. For the first time in his career, Vorex saw fear on their scaled features. Commander Vorex, Grand Admiral Z hissed, scales flared. What have you done? I followed orders, Vorex growled. A demonstration as you commanded, the humans provoked us. They have burned our capital, Counselor Thrick snapped. Her voice shook, but not with anger, with terror. Our defenses are in ruins. Human ships appear across 6 colony worlds. They were invisible until they struck. We never saw them coming. That's impossible, Vorex shouted. They were supposed to be primitive. Counselor Dren, the youngest, leaned forward, his face pale. There are sealed records, Commander. Records dating back to the Dryorans. Records the previous council locked away as existential threats. The name Dryoran again. Vorex's breath came shallow. You mean humanity destroyed them? A silence fell over the council, heavy, condemning. At last, Counselor Thrick spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. We don't know, but the humans warned you, didn't they? They told you to research our history, and now our capital burns. Another explosion rocked the dominant force, pulling Vorex's gaze back to the deck. Smoke filled the air. Officers staggered, bloodied. The council's voices pressed through the comms, insistent. Cease hostilities immediately. Return to Vrea, negotiate. We cannot defeat them. Negotiate, the word stung worse than retreat. The Vraxian Empire did not negotiate. They dictated, they ruled. Yet the capital burned. The colonies rose in rebellion. Human warships prowled their skis. Vorex's claws trembled. For the first time, he wondered if perhaps the stories of the Dryorans' fall were not tragedy, but warning. On the cracked deck of his one-sprowed warship, Commander Zach Vorex whispered words he never thought he would speak. They are just humans, that's what we all said. Another blast shuttered the ship, drowning out his voice. And somewhere deep inside, for the first time in his life, Vorex felt the taste of despair. The dominant force limped through the void, systems flickering as engineers rushed to contain hull breaches. The once invincible flagship of the Vraxian fleet now looked battered, wounded, almost prey. Commander Zach Vorex sat rigid in his private quarters, the faces of the High Council staring at him through the comms array. Their usual imperious expressions were gone, replaced with panic and something worse, resignation. You will cease hostilities at once, Counselor Thrick demanded, her voice taut with fear. Return to Vrea with all possible speed. We will negotiate with the humans. Negotiate? Vorex growled, his pride thrashing like a wounded beast. The Empire does not negotiate, we dictate terms. The capital is burning, Grand Admiral Z hissed. Our primary defense grid has been dismantled. Human ships patrol 6 of our colonies. Our subject worlds are already declaring independence. Commander, we no longer have the power to dictate anything. The words struck Vorex harder than any weapon. The mighty Vraxian Empire reduced to pleading. And then another chime echoed through his quarters. Another transmission. He froze as the comms officer's voice whispered. Commander, it's them, the humans. Vorex's scales prickled. Put it through. The council's images vanished, replaced by Captain Jackson's steady face. Her short-cropped hair framed eyes that glowed with calm certainty, the eyes of someone holding all the pieces in a game her opponent didn't know they were playing. Commander, she said with a nod, I trust you have spoken with your leadership. You, Vorex spat, struggling to keep his composure. You have monitored even this. Jackson's lips quirked into something between a smile and a warning. Commander, we have been monitoring your communications for centuries. You only think you discovered Earth 3 years ago. In truth, You discovered only what we allowed you to see." Her words landed like hammer blows. "Impossible," Vorex muttered. "You are lying. You cannot have concealed yourselves for centuries." Jackson's gaze hardened. "We can, and we did." She leaned closer to the feed, her voice low, deliberate. 300 years ago, your scouts passed through this system. They never reported back. Do you know why?" Vorex's throat tightened. He remembered whispers of a lost survey team, dismissed as accident or equipment failure. "They never returned," Jackson continued, "because we intercepted them. We studied them, and we learned. Every empire that came sniffing around this planet became another lesson. The Dryorians, the Ganthians, others you don't even know the names of anymore." Vorex's blood ran cold. "You mean?" "Yes," Jackson said. "We were there when the Dryorians vanished. Their fleets were mighty, their arrogance greater, but they fell. And do you know why, Commander?" Her eyes pierced the screen. "Because they believed we were primitive, just like you." The weight of her words pressed on him until his scales ached. "This is madness," he snapped, grasping for control. "If you had this power for so long, why hide? Why not claim your rightful place among the stars?" Jackson's voice softened, though her gaze did not. "Because we don't want to rule, we don't want an empire, we want to live, to protect ourselves, to be left alone. But when empires like yours come demanding tribute, threatening conquest, we defend ourselves. And when we do," she gestured off-screen, "empires burn." The feed shifted. The face of Captain Jackson vanished, replaced by a live stream of Calor Prime, one of the oldest and most prestigious Vraxian colonies. The image showed a massive human ship hovering above the capital city. "This is a live feed," Jackson's voice narrated. "We have similar vessels positioned above all your major colony worlds. Your empire is finished. Accept reality, and perhaps your people will survive." The image switched again. Another colony, another human ship, then another, and another. Vorex staggered to his feet, claws trembling. How did you build such a fleet undetected?" The feed cut back to Jackson's face. Her expression was steady, unshaken. "The same way we built the shield around Earth, hidden, layer by layer, preparing for the day when another empire came calling, preparing for you." Vorex slumped back into his chair, the weight of the revelation crashing over him. "You cannot possibly occupy all our systems. The empire spans hundreds of worlds." At that, Jackson finally smiled, genuine but sharp as a blade. "Occupy? Commander, you still don't understand. We don't want your empire. We don't want your worlds, your resources, your people. We want freedom, for ourselves, and for those you have subjugated under the guise of protection." Her eyes locked with his. "The Vraxian protection racket ends today." The words left no space for defiance. Vorex's mind raced, searching for some anchor of certainty. What do you want of us?" Jackson leaned forward. Her tone was colder than space itself. "We want you to survive, but only if you surrender. Disarm your fleets, withdraw from the colonies, and accept a galaxy where you are no longer feared." The line cut, leaving Vorex alone in his quarters. For the first time in his life, the commander of the Empire's most feared fleet sat in silence, crushed by a single realization. The humans had been waiting for them. The dominant force drifted in silence, her proud hull scarred and wounded, while Commander Zach Vorex stood at the observation port of his quarters. Beyond the glass stretched the endless dark, cold and uncaring, studded with stars that suddenly felt less like conquered jewels and more like distant witnesses to his humiliation. For centuries, the Vraxian Empire had ruled the galaxy with the certainty of gods. Now, in a matter of hours, that illusion crumbled. The chime of an incoming priority transmission shattered his thoughts. "Sir," Lieutenant Grull's strained voice came through, bypassing protocol in her panic. We are receiving reports from across the Empire. Colonies are declaring independence. Rebellions are breaking out everywhere." Vorex turned sharply. "What?" Grull's image appeared, her facial tendrils twitching violently. 12 systems already. 3 governors have publicly denounced the High Council. They claim humanity has freed them from our so-called protection." Her words hit harder than any weapon strike. Plex's voice followed, shaky and pale. "Sir, our subjects believe the humans. They are broadcasting across every frequency, showing the collapse of Rhea's capital, the destruction of our defense grid. They call the humans liberators." "Liberators?" Vorex snarled, his claws scraping the railing. "They are executioners, nothing more." But even as he said it, he felt the lie in his own words. The comms crackled again. Another report, another governor defecting, another world refusing tribute. The Empire wasn't just under attack, it was splintering from within. On the command deck, Vorex stormed back onto the deck. Smoke lingered from damaged consoles, and officers moved with the shell-shocked stiffness of soldiers who had seen their gods bleed. "Status," Vorex barked. The weapons officer, scales dulled with exhaustion, looked up. "Sir, repairs are ongoing. Shields remain offline. Engines at 60%. Before Vorex could respond, Plex cried out, "Incoming transmission from Kalar Prime." The deck froze. Kalar Prime, jewel of the outer colonies, had been loyal for 10,000 years. "Put it through," Vorex ordered. The screen flickered, revealing the face of Governor Thulek, a proud Vraxian once draped in imperial banners, now flanked by humans in dark, functional armor. His eyes blazed not with fear, but with a new, dangerous pride. "Commander Vorex," Thulek said, "your empire is finished. Kalar Prime stands free. Humanity has offered us the one thing you never did, dignity." The deck erupted in shouts of outrage. "You would betray 10 millennia of order for a handful of mammals," Vorex roared. Thulek sneered. "Order, you mean slavery. We are done bleeding for your council's arrogance. We stand with Earth." The feed cut. The deck fell into horrified silence. The weight of history. Vorex's claws trembled as he gripped the railing. His mind drifted back to Captain Jackson's words. "Your protection racket ends today." Was this how the Drayorans had fallen? Not in glorious battle, but in slow collapse, their subjects rising the moment humanity struck. He could almost hear the whispers of history mocking him. They are just humans. But they were not anymore, perhaps not ever. The AI's warning. The ship's AI spoke again, its neutral voice now tinged with urgency. "Commander Vorex, fleet integrity compromised. Multiple ships report mutiny within their crews, threat level catastrophic." "Mutiny?" Vorex snarled. "Yes," the AI replied. "Officers sympathetic to rebellion, some demanding surrender to humanity, others abandoning posts." The deck stirred, fear ran like fire through the crew. Grull looked up from her console, her tendrils quivering. "Sir, what if humanity is right?" Vorex whipped toward her, rage flaring. "Right, they are deceivers, they are manipulators, they." The ship rocked violently, cutting him off. Another impact, not from Earth this time, but from the fleet itself. "Sir," Plex cried out, "one of our cruisers has fired on us." The deck went still. "What?" Vorex demanded. "Confirmed," Plex stammered. "The Iron Fang, they've defected. Their crew has sworn loyalty to Earth's alliance." Betrayal from within. Vorex's scales crawled as a realization colder, then space itself settled over him. The Empire wasn't just burning. It was collapsing into ash. Humanity speaks again. The comms flared one final time. Captain Jackson's face returned, calm as ever. "Commander," she said, "do you see now? This isn't just our war. The galaxy itself has turned against you. Your reign of fear is over. The longer you resist, the more worlds will rise." Her gaze bored into him, steady and unyielding. "Surrender, Commander, not for us, for your people, before you lose everything." The transmission ended. The deck remained in silence, broken only by the groaning of the wounded ship. For the first time in his career, Zach Vorex had no answer. No command. Only the terrible knowledge that the humans had not just defeated his fleet. They had lit the match that would burn an empire. The corridors of the dominant force felt different now. Where once Vorex's presence inspired rigid salutes and hushed respect, now he saw hesitation in the eyes of his crew. Fear, doubt, even defiance. His empire was unraveling, thread by thread, and he could feel it pulling apart inside his ship as well. The chime of High Council priority override rang in his quarters. Vorex strode to the console, his claws scraping across its edge as the comms activated. The faces of the council appeared, scales dulled, expressions tight with panic. Grand Admiral Z's voice was sharp and venomous. "Commander Vorex, explain yourself. You were ordered to conduct a demonstration, not to provoke full-scale war with humanity." Vorex's jaw tightened. "I followed orders, a warning shot. They turned it aside with impossible defenses. They struck our capital before we could blink. Our fleets are crippled, our colonies defect, and you sit there demanding explanations. Councillor Thrick hissed. Enough insolence. The Empire has stood for 10,000 years. We will not bow to one upstart world of mammals. They are not just mammals, Vorex snapped. His claws slammed down, denting the console. They are hunters. They have been watching us for centuries. They knew our every move before we made it. You speak as if they are gods, Z spat. They are not, they bleed, they must bleed. Vorex leaned forward, his voice a low growl. Tell that to the capital, tell that to the colonies, tell that to the fleets that no longer answer to us. A silence followed, heavy and suffocating. At last, the youngest counselor, Dren, spoke. His voice trembled but carried the weight of something the others lacked, honesty. Commander, there are records, sealed archives locked by the previous council, records about the Dryorans, about the Ganthians, about the humans. Every eye turned to him. Speak, Vorex ordered. Dren swallowed. The archives marked humanity as an existential threat. Their name has appeared in connection with 3 empires' falls, always hidden, always dismissed as myth, until now. The other counselors hissed in outrage, but none could deny the truth pressing in on them. Thrick's voice cracked. Then we must sue for peace, send envoys, offer tribute, negotiate. Vorex's scales flared. Negotiate, tribute. Words unworthy of the Empire, yet what choice remained? Before he could speak, another chime split the air. An unauthorized transmission forced its way through Imperial firewalls. The Council's feed vanished. Captain Jackson's face appeared once again, her expression calm but her voice iron. Commander, Council, this is your last chance. Surrender your fleets, dismantle your defenses, release your colonies, end the Empire, or face extinction. Z roared, his scales bristling. You dare to dictate terms to the Vraxian Empire. Jackson's eyes narrowed. I don't dictate, I warn. Look outside your windows, counselors. Look at your burning capital. Look at your collapsing fleets. This is not negotiation. This is survival. Her voice softened, though it carried no pity. We don't want your worlds. We don't want your people. But we will not allow your empire to continue enslaving the galaxy. The choice is yours. Surrender or join the Dryorans in history's grave. The feed cut, leaving silence behind. Vorex's claws trembled against the console. He looked at the council, their eyes wide with terror. For the first time, he saw them not as gods of authority, but as frightened old reptiles hiding behind pomp and titles. Commander, Dren whispered, you must decide, do we fight and die, or surrender and live? The words clawed at Vorex's pride, at the marrow of his being. His entire life had been service to an empire that promised eternity, and now eternity had ended in a single day. He thought of his crew, their faces pale with fear. He thought of the colonies rising in rebellion. He thought of the humans watching, waiting, ready to strike harder than ever. Vorex straightened. His scales dulled with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with a final decision. Order the fleet to stand down, he said, each word tasting like ash. Gasps erupted from the council. You dare, Z began, but Vorex cut him off with a roar. I dare because we have no choice. You think we can fight? Look around you. We are finished. The humans have beaten us, and if we resist further, we will share the fate of the Dryorans. The council fell into silence. Vorex's chest heaved, his claws shaking. If this empire is to die, let it die with enough survivors to rebuild, not as ash scattered across the stars. No one spoke, no one objected. The decision was made. On the command deck, Vorex returned, his presence heavy with the weight of his order. The crew stared at him, waiting. His voice carried across the deck. Transmit to all ships, stand down, power down weapons, prepare to receive human terms. The words fell like stone into a still ocean. Ripples of shock passed through the officers, through the entire fleet. Grull's tendrils twitched. Sir, you are certain. Vorex closed his eyes. I am certain. The deck went quiet. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Vraxian Empire's fleet obeyed an order not to strike, not to conquer, not to intimidate, but to surrender. And somewhere in the darkness between stars, humanity waited. The order spread through the Vraxian fleet like wildfire. One by one, warships that had once been the terror of the stars went dark. Cannons powered down, shields dropped, engines fell to idle hums. Across the void, silence reigned. For the first time in its 10,000-year history, the Vraxian Empire's armada had laid down its arms. Commander Zach Vorex stood on the deck of the dominant force, his shoulders heavy, his scales dulled with shame. Around him, his officers moved with mechanical obedience, too stunned, too broken to speak. "Transmission incoming," Plex whispered. His spindly hands trembled. "From the humans." "Put it through," Vorex ordered, his voice hollow. The screen flickered. Captain Jackson appeared, her posture straight, her eyes sharp. Behind her, a room of humans in various uniforms, Earth Defense Force, Orbital Command, naval officers. They looked calm, collected, victorious. Jackson's gaze swept across the Vraxian bridge, her voice steady. "Commander Vorex, High Council, people of the Empire, it is over." The words echoed like thunder in the silence. "From this moment forward," she continued, "your fleets will disarm, your colonies will choose their own fates. Your protection racket ends today. Humanity does not seek your destruction, but we will not permit your domination to continue." Her eyes locked on Vorex. "You will assist in rebuilding. You will accept a galaxy where you are no longer feared. And if you resist, if you dare rise again, remember the Draorans. Remember your burning capital." A hush fell over the deck. Officers shifted, their faces etched with disbelief, anger, and beneath it all, fear. Vorex forced his voice to work. "You ask us to surrender our empire, everything we are, everything we built." "No," Jackson said, her tone cutting but not cruel. "I ask you to survive. Empires fall, people endure, choose survival." The line cut, leaving only Earth's image on the screen. A small, blue-green world, wrapped in invisible shields, pulsing with defiance. The High Council's panic. Later, in a private session with the High Council, chaos reigned. Z spat venom, his scales flaring. "We cannot yield. We are Vraxian. The galaxy is ours by right." "Right," Councilor Dren snapped. "What right? Look around you. Our colonies are gone, our fleets broken. The humans could destroy us at any moment. They hold back only out of mercy." "Mercy," Z roared. "They mock us, they humiliate us." "Better humiliation than extinction," Thrick said coldly. "Commander Vorex was correct. We must accept this new reality, or we will not live to see another dawn." The council fell into furious argument, voices clashing like blades. But Vorex barely heard them. His mind was elsewhere, on the humans. On Captain Jackson. On the quiet certainty in her eyes when she had said, "Empires fall, people endure." Humanity's demonstration. The humans had not withdrawn after victory. Instead, they revealed their true strength. Hidden fleets uncloaked across the stars, not to conquer, but to stand watch. Orbital platforms appeared above colony worlds, not raining fire, but shielding them. Messages broadcast on every frequency. "You are free. The Vraxian Empire no longer owns you. Choose your own path." The effect was immediate. Uprisings turned to celebrations. Worlds that had lived under tribute and fear for centuries now raised banners of independence. But the most unsettling part was this. The humans did not claim these worlds for themselves. They did not demand tribute. They simply let them go. And the galaxy whispered in awe and fear. The commander's choice. In his quarters, Vorex stared at the void. Lieutenant Grull entered quietly, her tendrils subdued. "Sir, the fleet awaits your next order." "My next order?" Vorex's voice was a rasp. He had given countless orders in his life. Orders that destroyed cities, orders that toppled nations, orders that expanded the Empire's reach. Now the only order left was surrender. "What would you do, Lieutenant?" he asked, his voice low. Grull hesitated. "I would survive, sir. I would live to see what comes next. Perhaps learn from them." Vorex turned. Her eyes were steady, more steady than his own. And he realized the truth. Fear was no longer loyalty. The Empire had lost not just power, but belief. He gave the order. "Transmit to all vessels, stand down permanently, begin disarmament, we will comply." His words carried across the fleet, across the Empire, across the galaxy, sealed the end of 10,000 years. The burning capital. From orbit, the once great capital of Rhea smoldered. Towers that had stood eternal were now ruins. Flames licked the night sky. Vorex watched the feed in silence. His forearms hung limply at his sides. His scales, once polished with pride, now dulled with resignation. Grull stood beside him, Sir, what happens now? Vorex's voice was hollow. Now we live without an empire, without fear, without arrogance. His eyes lingered on the flames. They are just humans, that's what we all said. A bitter laugh escaped him, broken and soft. But we were wrong, so terribly wrong. Epilogue, a new galactic reality. Weeks later, the galaxy was transformed. The Vraxian Empire no longer ruled. Its world splintered into new governments, alliances, experiments in freedom. The humans did not occupy, they did not seize power, they simply watched. Silent guardians, shields hidden in orbit, fleets cloaked in the dark. The galaxy's whispers grew louder. What else have they hidden? How long have they been waiting? For Commander Zach Vorex, the whispers meant little. He had seen the truth firsthand. Humanity was not primitive. Humanity was not weak. Humanity was patient. Humanity was prepared. And when pushed too far, humanity burned empires.